Have you ever wondered why some people get fat and others don't? I certainly think most of us would like to be just a little bit thinner. You might have a hunch that genetics has something to do with people's weight, and you'd be absolutely right. Researchers have known this for a long time because identical twins, who have exactly the same DNA, tend to have much more similar weight than fraternal twins, who only share half of their DNA. However, we're only just beginning to understand which genes affect a person's weight and how they do that. I want to tell you about how we use a special kind of math called statistics to try to answer this important question and ultimately learn things that will help us improve people's health. An intuitive way to approach this question may be to weigh people and compare their DNA, trying to find places in the DNA where heavier people are different from lighter people. But this is not a trivial task. For one, the human genome, all the DNA of a single person, is a long sequence of 6 billion chemical bases, 3 billion from the father and 3 billion from the mother, that contain the instructions for making a human being. If you were to print the entire genomic sequence of just one person on paper, it would not fill up a book, but an entire bookshelf of over 100 volumes. Now, if you were to do this for everyone in your study, you would need an enormous library like the one we have here at the University of Michigan. Now try comparing these by hand, trying to find differences in the DNA between people, and making conclusions about which genes are important. So that is why we need statistics, which is a set of methods for collecting and making sense of data. This illustration shows how we use statistics for this type of problem. Each point represents the body mass index, or BMI, of one person in the study, which is weight divided by height squared. Using BMI instead of weight helps to account for the fact that tall people weigh more than short people, but are not necessarily overweight. We'll look at a particular location on chromosome 16 in the gene FTO. These points on the left are the individuals who have the version of this gene with the chemical base T, while these points over here on the right are the BMIs of everyone with an A base instead of a T in that same place in the gene. The points in the middle are the BMI of everyone who has both versions of the gene, because they inherited the T version from one parent and the A version from the other. Statistics then allows us to find the best straight line that goes through the middle of all these points. If having a different version of the gene doesn't have an effect on BMI, then you would expect the line to be more or less flat. You can see that our line has a very slight upward trend compared to this flat line, because people with the A version of the gene have slightly higher BMI than people with the T. Statistics can also tell us how likely it would be to get a line like this just by chance if there is no actual relationship between the gene and BMI. If you repeat this analysis at all the places where the DNA sequence is known to differ between people and plot the results, you get something that looks like this. On the bottom you can see labels for chromosomes 1 through 22. The chromosomes X and Y that determine sex are excluded. The height of each point corresponds to how unlikely it would be to see the combinations of BMI and version of gene for all the people in your study, assuming that there was no relationship between that gene and BMI. The highest points are the ones that are least likely under that assumption. This shows evidence that the FTO gene here in chromosome 16, which I showed before, is actually related to BMI. So what have researchers learned by using statistics in this way? Before this study, scientists expected that genes involved in metabolism, like processing energy and storing fat, would have the strongest effect on BMI. However, it turns out that this gene on chromosome 16, and many of the others that have been discovered since then, are most active in the brain, and are involved in our appetite and causing the sensation of being hungry or full. This is a pretty cool and surprising insight about how our genes can affect our weight, which would not have been possible without the power of statistics.